Hey, folks, man, we just ain't gonna let it rest today. We've got Michael, Craig, Leon, uh, Scott, uh, Lewis, and who else are you today? Anyway, he's gonna do this video today, and we'll have a little fun with it today. Gotta get out here and have fun, because we're at work. So, anyhow, Sides of Truck by Michael, Craig, Scott.
Alright, well, first thing I would like to do is check your mirrors, because you got hood mirrors on this truck. Most of our trucks don't, but this one does. Check to make sure they're properly mount secured here and here by these bolts and these brackets that mount to the hood. Check to make sure that the glass is not cracked or has any illegal stickers, that it is properly adjusted where you can see down the side of the truck. Second thing we do is we start right here on this with the door handle. We make sure it's properly mount secured and that it opens. And then come in here, you want to check to make sure that your door hinges are properly mounted secured by these bolts. They're not loose, bent, or broke, so just give that a tug like that. Make sure it's not bent, broke, or cracked. And you also got weather stripping that runs to the inside of the vehicle on the truck. Check to make sure it is not cracked, dry rotted, and because this keeps moisture and air and noise out of the cab. If you get moisture in there with all electronics, it will short something out. And after you check that, you would check your weather stripping to make sure it is not dry rotted, cracked, or has no moisture or slips in where you let the moisture in. You got your grab bar. This is what you use to help yourself get in the truck when you go to get in the truck. You check to make sure it's properly mounted secured here and here, and that these bolts are not missing, loose, bent, or broke. You also got this mirror, where it's properly mounted secured to the side of the truck by these screws, and that it is properly adjusted where you can see down the side of the combination vehicle, and the glass is not bent, broke, or cracked, and has no illegal stickers. You also have your electrical wires that run for your heated mirrors that mount on the side of the truck. You check to make sure they're not chafed or burnt or frayed, because if they frayed or burnt or anything like that, when you need your heated mirrors, they will not work. Move down here to our battery box. It's properly mounted secured, it's not cracked. And if I were to check the batteries, I take the battery box off, and because I don't smell any sulfur or anything like that to indicate the batteries are hot or burnt. But to check that, you would pull this lens off, pull the latch off, and pull this one off, and you check it. That's how you check to make sure your batteries are properly mounted secured and the caps are on and they're not leaking. Over here you have your steps, properly mounted secured. They're not bent, broke, or cracked, and they've got bolts holding them on, so you check to make sure the bolts are not missing, loose, bent, or broke. You also have your fuel tank on this side. It's properly mounted secured by these straps, and there's rubber in behind these straps. You check to make sure the rubbers are there, because if not, when you're driving down the road, the tank will vibrate and rub a hole in, then you'll have a leak. Check to make sure it's properly mounted secured and you have no fluid loss. Right here is your fuel cap. There's a gasket in behind here. Check to make sure it's not dry rot or cracked, because if it is, it'll leak out and there'll be fluid running down here on the ground, and it'll have an issue. Right here, is our center unit. It's properly mounted secured by these screws, and there's a gasket underneath here too as well. You check to make sure it's not dry rot or cracked and it's not leaking. You also have electrical wires running from this, from the plug-in up to the front of the truck. You check to make sure they're not burnt or frayed and that they are not shorted out, because if they short out, the fuel gauge inside will not work. You look under here, you have fuel lines running to this tank. You check to make sure they're not dry rot or cracked or leaking, and that they are properly mounted secured. If you look right underneath the truck, which you can't hardly see because the sun's right on it, but you have your transmission and your bell housing and your bell housing bolts. And you have to make sure that the bell housing bolts are properly mounted secured. They're not missing, bent, broke, or cracked. And you check to make sure that your bell housing is properly mounted secured, not bent, broke, or cracked, because sometimes these can crack on these trucks. And underneath the transmission is a cross member. It is either bolted on or welded on, just like this one here. This one has bolts and welds in it. You check to make sure it's not dry, it's not cracked, bent, or broke, and the bolts are not loose. If they were loose, you have shiny threads that indicate a loose nut, because these do not have nuts on. They have set nuts, which they do not come off because they're welded to the truck. Right here, as you can see, this is the outside and inside of the frame. You will be checking that to make sure there's no illegal notching, bends, breaks, cracks, or welds. It says right here, this frame is a heat-treated frame. Do not damage the frame or heat or weld on the frame or drill or cut. You also have your air receiver dryer right here. It's properly mounted secured and I have no air loss. You also have your air junction box, which is right here. It's properly mounted secured and I have no air loss because it has air lines to it. So you check the air lines to make sure that they are not dry rot or cracked and you have no air loss coming out of those. You also have another cross member right here. It's properly mounted secured by these bolts and welds, and it's not bent, broke, or cracked. And you do not have a loose bolt, because if you did, you have shiny threads that indicate you have a loose nut. Also, if you look right here, running right here, there's our drive shaft. It's properly mounted secured by U-bolts, and it's got U-joints. You check to make sure that the U-bolts are properly mounted secured and not loose or missing, and you check to make sure that the drive shafts are properly greased on the U-joints. Because if not, the U-joints will go bad and it causes you to throw a drive shaft out. Alright, if you look right here, we have 2 rear ends in this truck. We have a rear end here and another drive shaft running out the back of this rear end to the other rear end. The rear ends are properly mounted secured by leaf springs and leaf spring bolts. And you check to make sure the leaf springs are not bent, broke, or cracked. And you also check to make sure that the leaf spring bolts are not loose, because if they were loose, you'd lose the rear end out of it. You check to make sure that you have no shiny threads or a loose nut to indicate you'd have a loose rear end. And you also have air and electrical lines running the length of the tractor. You check to make sure that they are not chafed or freighted or hot, and you also check the air lines to make sure they're not dry rot or cracked and you hear no air loss. If you look right here, which I can't really see because this is in my way, but if you look right here, you have a torsion bar, adjustable torsion bar here, and another stationary torsion bar right here.
Let's go around to the other side for a minute. Well, I will go around to the other side. All right.
You have an adjustable torsion bar right here, and you have a stationary torsion bar right underneath where you're standing. Make sure that the stationary torsion bar is properly mounted secured, not bent, broke, or cracked. And you want to make sure that the adjustable torsion bar is properly mounted secured, not bent, broke, or cracked, and is properly adjusted. Right here you have your air lines that run from here to the junction box, which is properly mounted secured and not leaking. That runs down to your brake chamber, which is properly mounted secured with a brake chamber clamp and bolts. And I hear no air loss from the brake chamber itself. Also, you have a brake chamber push rod and a brake chamber clevis. They're properly mounted secured, not bent, broke, or cracked. To check that, what you would do is you would chalk the vehicle, release the truck brakes, and see if you can pull on that clevis more than an inch. If you can pull on it more than an inch, it's out of adjustment. You need to take it to the shop and have it adjusted immediately, because it will be dangerous and you can get a ticket for it. All that attaches with a pin and a Carter key to the slack adjuster. The slack adjuster, what it does is when you apply the brakes, it pushes that rod out and twists that slack adjuster, which pushes the brake shoes out, and it makes contact with the drums. And to make sure the slack adjuster is properly mounted, secured, and properly greased, because these do have grease fittings on them. To check the shoes on this truck to make sure that they're in the proper measurements, you have to check to make sure they have no less than a 1/4 inch of material on the shoes. And you also will check your drums to make sure that the lining of the drums are in measurements and that they are not cracked or have any moisture on them to indicate you would have bad brakes. Just like on the shoes, you check to make sure they have no cracks or missing parts of the shoe, or they have no moisture to indicate you have a leak, or you would have hardly any time stopping on the truck. You also have, if you look back here, you have airbags. They're properly mounted secured, and you hear no air loss, because if one is flat, they're all flat. Because this is the suspension on this truck. This truck only has one leaf spring. It does not have multiple leaf springs like older vehicles. This one has airbags for air ride. So if one of these bags go flat, the whole air ride system on this truck is gone bad. So you want to check to make sure you hear no air loss and that they are not dry rot or cracked. So now what we're going to do is we got our fender, which is properly mounted secured by these bolts.
I want to walk around the other side.
Go ahead, I will.
Yeah.
We have our fender here is properly mounted secured by these bolts to the frame. They have no any indications of any shiny threads or a loose nut. They indicate we'd have a loose fender. If this falls off, it's going to hurt somebody. This replaces the mud flaps on the rear of this truck, because that's what these are designed for. So now what we're going to do, we run half of the wheel assembly. Now we're going to run the outside of the wheel assembly. So what you would do first, you would check the inside of this tire for any bulging, dry rotting, or cracking. Because if you have a bulge on it or dry rotting or cracking, you indicate you have a slip radial belt, and that's bad because it'll cause a bad vibration. Then you want to check the top of the tire right here to indicate you have even tread wear across the tire, and you have no less than 2/30 seconds of tread wear on these tires. Because if you have any less, then the DOT can write you a ticket.
Well, Michael, do me a favor. I want you to do me a favor right there. After you tell me about the bud spacing right there, the bud space, I want you to just run that outside tire and wheel assembly, and then you can go ahead and say that I'll check the inside the same way.
Okay.
That'll shorten it.
All right. If you check the bud spacing here in between these two tires, this is what we have. We have bud spacing wheels. It's like they're kissing. You check to make sure there's no debris or any dirt, rocks, mud, or anything like that.
Bud spacing right there.
So that way you make sure that when you're driving down the road, you do not have anything fly out from underneath the truck and hit somebody and it could possibly hurt somebody. Now what we're going to do, we're going to run the outside of this tire. We check to make sure that there's no dry rotting or cracks or bulges, to make sure that we have no slip radial belt. We also got valve stems and valve stem caps right here. You check to make sure it's properly mounted secured and you hear no air loss. To check this air pressure in this tire, you take the valve cap off, screw it off, and you stick an air gauge to it. And they either subtract air or add air. And to find out how much air these tires are rated for, you look right here on the sidewall of the tire. These tires are rated for 120 psi. So you'd either subtract air or add air to that direct psi. Do not go over that 120 psi because you will blow a tire out. Holding all this wheel simply on is 10 lug nuts and 10 lug studs. If they're properly mounted secured, to check for a loose nut or anything like that, you look to see if you have any rust indication down here or any shiny threads indicating you have a loose nut, because a loose nut's a bad day. Alright, you check the inside and outside of the welds on these wheels. As you can see, they're welded right here together. You check to make sure the welds are not cracked and you have no air leaking out of these welds, because if this wheel has a cracked weld, it will leak air out and it'll cause you to have a bad vibration on this truck, especially if you're loaded. You also have a cap right here that holds all the bearing oil in, and it's held on by these nuts. And what you do on this, you check to make sure these nuts have no shiny threads and they're not loose, and to check to make sure there is a gasket back here. So what you would do on the gasket, you check to make sure you have no oil residue down here in the wheel, to make sure the gasket's doing its proper job. Now after you run this wheel assembly, you have 3 other wheel assemblies identical to it. So what you would ask your examiner is, you would say, hey, I'd like to emit these wheel assemblies. And she or he will say yes or no. If she says yes or no, if she says yes, you go on and go to something else. If she says no, you have to run the other wheel assemblies. So after you would do that, you go down here, and also you have shocks on this truck. They're properly mounted secured by these bolts and nuts, and that they are not leaking, because that is a big thing. You have to say they are not leaking or they will fail you for that. Alright, if you move on back here, again, you have another shock. It's properly mounted secured and it's not leaking. You also have your truck's marker lights and brake lights and turn signals and reverse lights. They're properly mounted secured and don't have any cracks indicated short, and that they are not bent, broken, cracked. You also have your vehicle's backup alarm. This is for indicate that if you're backing up and somebody can hear you, so that way they get out of your way. It's properly mounted secured and it's not bent, broken, cracked. And you also have electrical wires running to it. So you want to make sure it's properly mounted secured and not burnt or freighted. Alright, now what you do is we're going to walk to the other side of the truck.
Let's walk to the other side then. There can't possibly be more stuff over here.
As on the other side is over here, we have a mirror.
Alright.
A hood mirror is properly mounted secured.
Yeah.
It's not bent, broken, cracked, and just like the glass, you want to make sure it's properly mounted secured, and the glass ain't busted, and it's free of any illegal stickers.
Love it, day.
And you also got another mirror here. You want to make sure it's properly adjusted and it's properly mounted secured, not bent, broken, cracked, and the glass has no illegal stickers and it's not busted or broke. And also over here, as I seen, different. This is our air tank system for the truck. These are properly mounted secured and they have to be drained daily, because there's a valve right here. You would open that valve or push that valve in to drain these air tanks, because if you don't, moisture will get in them and cause the lines in the tanks to freeze and it'll bust. Then you will not have no brakes, and it's a bad day. You also have air lines running to the tank. You want to make sure they're properly mounted secured, not dry rot or cracked, and you hear no air loss. You also have your marker light on the side of the truck, as you do on the other side. It's properly mounted secured and has no cracks to cause a short, because if it causes a short, moisture's going to get in there and it'll cause a short. And then
It's also a turn signal light.
yes,
too,
it's a
isn't it?
marker light and a turn signal. As over here as over there, you have another fuel cap with another fuel tank. You want to check to make sure the fuel cap is properly mounted secured, and there's a gasket in behind here. You want to make sure it's not dry rot or cracked, and it's not leaking, because if it was leaking, it'd run down the side of the tank and on the floor, on the ground. You also have another spot for a fuel sending unit. You want to check to make sure that these screws are properly mounted and secured and they're tight, and that the gasket underneath here is not dry rot or cracked or leaking. You also have the fuel tank is properly secured by these straps, and that they're properly secured by the straps, not bent, broken, or cracked. You also have rubber underneath these straps. That way, when you're driving down the road, the tanks might not, so the tanks don't vibrate and come loose. That way, when they vibrate and come loose, it'll rub a hole in the tank, and then it'll cause you to have a leak. You want to check to make sure that the rubbers are underneath here, so it does not do that. You also have steps on this side as well. You want to check to make sure they're properly mounted secured, so you give them a tug like that. Make sure they're properly mounted secured, not bent, broken, cracked, or missing.
Something made me think of exhaust a minute ago.
We'll get there. We also have another grab bar right here. It's properly mounted secured by these bolts. It is not missing, bent, broken, cracked. Same thing as over here. We have another door handle. It's properly mounted secured, and it is not bent, broken, cracked. You also have weather stripping on the inside of this door as well. You want to check to make sure it's not dry rot or cracked, so that way no air or moisture can get inside of here. Also, moving back here, we also have our vehicle's exhaust system, which, as you can see, It runs down through here underneath the cab. So what you want to do on this is you want to check to make sure that flex pipe right there does not crack or break, because if it does, if it cracks over time with age, it'll leak carbon monoxide poison up into the cab and poison the driver. And then you have this coming out here, and you have your muffler and your heat shield. The muffler is properly secured to this brace by these clamps and bolts. You want to check to make sure these clamps are tight and properly secured. You want to check to make sure this brace is properly secured to the frame, because it is with bolts and welds. You want to check to make sure that it is not bent, broke, or cracked. You also got a heat shield held on by these bolts all the way up. This is for indication of if you have somebody out here or somebody late at night, so you don't not touch this and burn yourself. You want to check to make sure it's properly mounted and secured. You also have your vehicle's toolbox. This is where we keep like our extra chains, boomers, or coolant, or anything like that what we might need out on the road. It's properly mounted, secured, not bent, broke, cracked, and it's not loose, because if it comes loose, it's going to fall off and hit somebody. We also have another fender over here. It's properly mounted, secured by these 4 bolts to the frame, and it is not bent, broke, or cracked. And to indicate that you have a loose bolt is that you would check to make sure you know shiny threads or any indication you have a loose nut. And now what you would do after you run that, you would take the time and you would review, and you go over and make sure in your head or out loud to say what you told the examiner. That way you know to yourself that you did everything that you can think of.
Absolutely.
So what you do is you go back over and look, just take your hand, just kind of go over everything in your head like you did the mirrors, the exhaust, the hood mirrors.
Did you get those, did you get the headlight lenses and the
See, I
blinkers?
forgot something. You want to check to make sure the headlights and lenses are properly mounted, secured, not cracked, because they have moisture in them, cause a short. You want to check to make sure that they're properly not busted, or not pointing down or hanging out. Same thing with these over here. Check to make sure they're properly mounted, secured, not cracked, or have any moisture to cause a short. And as you walk on the rim, you want to check you did the airbox, fuel tank steps. If you look underneath here, you have your air ride for your truck. You have your airbag shock, and you have a shock. You want to check to make sure the shock's properly mounted, secured, not leaking. And you want to check to make sure that the airbag is properly mounted, secured, and is not leaking. You hear no air loss, because if you do, the cab will sit down and it won't ride right. It'll ride uncomfortably.
You did point out these cross members right here.
I pointed out the cross
In
members.
the frame, you inspected the
frame.
frame what size? Well, I'll tell you what, I believe Michael's done an excellent job on the side of the truck right there. Let's give him a hand. Woo! All right, he went and he